Please have your seats, and Kathy is going to share her story for another 15 minutes. It's going to be a good time. Yes.
Yeah, God speaks to all of us in different ways. Like that? Okay. And he spoke to me and told me that I needed to share this story. I'm not one to get up in front of people and share things, but when you disobey God, you have consequences. And I know that, so anyway, I want to share with you today how God walked me through the COVID-19. I was in the hospital from January 6th to February 9th, and he never left my side once. I couldn't breathe a lot of the time, and I would think of the song, "There Was Jesus" by Zach Williams and Dolly Parton. And every time I couldn't breathe, I would think, there was Jesus. And my breath would come back. And I kept playing it over and over again, either in my mind or on my Kindle or on my phone. Anyway, it started on January 3rd, and I was in church here in the back seat, and my friend Barb convinced me to go to the emergency room, and they turned me away, but they did a COVID test, and I still wasn't feeling very good. Of course, my mouth is dry now, of course, but, oh, thank you. But I knew they called me 2 days later, and I still had problems breathing, and they said I had COVID, but I didn't know what to do because the emergency room had turned me away. And then on Wednesday, I got up, and I could hardly get dressed, and I walked into the family room, and I said, I can't breathe and walk at the same time. I've got to do something. And so I tried to call Lakeside, but I couldn't get their number, so I called somebody else, and it was a Rockbrook number, and they said, stay on the phone until the ambulance gets there. And then they took me to the Lakeside Hospital, and at the same time, my husband was asleep upstairs, and he didn't know what was going on. So I was gone, and he didn't know it. And they kept me because they knew I had COVID and sepsis and pneumonia and heart failure and 10 other things they listed as the admission requirement. And thank you. Anyway, I had this nurse named Jess, and the doctor told me if I hadn't had Jess, that he would have put me in intensive care immediately. But because I had her, he kept me out of intensive care for 2 days. And Jess talked to me about intensive care and asked me, what I wanted. And I said I didn't want anything to keep me alive and mechanically. And so she gave me a DNI bracelet, do not resuscitate, because I told her I wanted to see Jesus. And she told me I was very sick. And while we were talking about that, I could feel somebody tickling my toes, and I looked down, and it was the angels. And then on Friday, they moved me to the intensive care, and the Lord was with me because I saw another angel, and it was Michael. And he was there, and they were all dressed up in those space suits you see on TV, with the, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. I had an awesome peace, and my son texted me that he loved me. You didn't have much contact with anybody except family, and Pastor Babu came up once. But in intensive care, I was at peace. It wasn't like I thought, oh, I'm going to die or I'm really sick. But they told me I was really sick. I just thought, well, I'm here. What's going to happen? I wasn't scared. And then on Monday, they talked about putting me under a shield because I wasn't getting enough oxygen in my lungs. And then the next day, they talked about putting me on a ventilator, and I told them no. I told them the Lord would take care of that. And then 2 days later, they moved me out of intensive care, and that's got to be the Lord healing me, because I can't be so desperately ill and 2 days later move out of intensive care. And I know that it was because of all the prayers that were going up that I was at extreme peace the whole time, that I wasn't worried about what was going on. And like I said, I have a 10-inch Kindle, and I have a phone that plays songs, and I'd sing along with the songs, and so all the staff knew that I was a Christian, and I would listen to the Bible studies and the church services, and they would interrupt me, and I'd say, "Can you wait till after church?" And they'd say, "Yeah." Okay. And then on Sunday the 17th, I was out of intensive care, but I had a bad day because you're in the bed, you can't move, all you have is a response button for the nurse. And I pressed it, and I had this young girl come, and she said, "What do you need?" And I told her. She never came back. That happened 4 times. And until the shift changed, I didn't get anybody in there. And so the next day, it was like the Lord sent this lady. Her name was Carol. She wanted to know if I had any complaints. And I didn't have any of that problems the rest of the hospital. But and so she says, "Well, that won't happen again," and it didn't. She talked to him. And she was in my room 3 days, seeing to make sure that I didn't have any problems. But I know the Lord sent her. And then on Wednesday the 20th, January 20th, they moved me to a less intensive room again. I kept being moved around. And they called me and told me that I had to leave Lakeside and go to either Emmanuel, Madonna, or Select Specialty Hospital. And I had never heard of Select Specialty Hospital. But it was like the Lord said to me, "Go to Select." And so I immediately said, "I'm going to Select." And so the next day they took me in the ambulance over to Select. It's on 75th, right behind Bergen Mercy. A lot of people don't know it. No. And my husband was a little upset because he had never heard about it. And, he didn't know anything about it. And I think he wanted to make a choice too, but he didn't understand the ways of the Lord. So he didn't understand that I had to go there because that's what the Lord told me to go to Select. And so I had kind of a bad night that night because my husband was upset with me. And then they had 2 floors, And I was on the top floor for 6 days, and they would take you walking with the wheelchair behind you and the oxygen tank in the wheelchair. And I started out with 10 liters of oxygen, and again, there was Jesus, because I would be, because I couldn't breathe. And then 8, and then 5, and then 3, then 2, then 1. And then they finally took the oxygen away. But every time that I would go walking, I would think there was Jesus. And then on the 31st, my nurse took my resting oxygen, the one that I was when I was laying in bed, out of my nose during church. And as you can see in the picture, I had a big oxygen this is in intensive care, oxygen. And it had been 25 days that I had had oxygen. But she took it out of my nose during church. And I walked the halls without oxygen, and there was Jesus. Then the next day, they took my heart monitor away. So as you can see, every day they would take either a little bit of oxygen away, or they would take the heart monitor or something away. So the Lord was healing me little by little, and you could see him doing that. Then I talked to them about my home oxygen. I'd been on oxygen at night for 5 years. And there was a doctor there. His name was Dr. A because he couldn't pronounce his last name. Kind of like Pastor Babu's, yeah. And I have an illness that I need to have my meds at a certain time, and I need to have structure. And they were coming in at midnight and giving me my pills, and I need to have them at 9 o'clock. And anyway, I don't know what he did, but they started coming in at 9 o'clock every day. And I think that was the Lord too, And then I told him, he said, well, how did you sleep? And I said, well, they woke me up at 4:30 to take my vitals. And he says, that's the last time they'll do that. And it was. And one of the nurses came in and said, I don't know why you have to have your meds at 9 o'clock. And I said, because I get mean and nasty and angry. I figured if she didn't understand what the doctor said, I wasn't going to explain it to her. Anyway, the test showed that I didn't need my home oxygen. And when the oxygen company came and picked it up at my home, he told me, he said, most people when they get out of the hospital with COVID need oxygen. They don't not need it. And the hospital had told me that I was the first one that had left the hospital that had COVID without oxygen. And again, that was the Lord. Anyway, it's amazing what 5 weeks in the hospital can do to your body, and you have to learn how to walk again. And I had a lot of physical therapy and training at the gym, and I just keep praying that the Lord will keep healing me so that I can serve him better. If he doesn't, I still trust him, and I love him more than you'll ever know. And I thank you for your prayers, your texts, and your word cards. Thank you.